Okay, welcome everybody. We are so pleased to have Tom Dreesen here today. So thank you for attending. And for those of you who may not be familiar with Tom, although I'd be surprised if you're not, he's a very well-known actor and comedian, stand-up comedian. He has performed for Frank Sinatra for at least 13 years. There were different numbers, so Tom can correct us on the amount of years. And he's been in the industry for over 50 years. Now he has turned to motivational speaking. And we are looking forward to hearing what he has to say about life in general and how to be successful in this world today. So Francis, would you like to begin?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I've been a Tom Dreesen fan for most of my life, and I used to watch him on Letterman. And you, Tom, I think you were on Carson a bunch of times too, aren't you?
I did 61 appearances on the Tonight Show. Over 50 on
Yeah, that's what I thought.
61 on the Tonight
Because
Show.
I would come home late from my gigs as a drummer, and of course the Tonight Show was on twice. It was on at 11:30, and then it came on later, as you know. And one of my favorite things was watch the comics, you know, and your sets were always impeccable. They were just, you know, Tom is never a dirty comic. He's never trying to shock you with his humor. He's a thinking man's comic, and he's a gentleman. And I got to tell you, what a thrill it was to meet him at the Laugh Factory. Because I walked in and a couple of friends of mine were performing, and then I saw Tom on stage, and I went, "Oh my God, Tom Dreesen!" I lost my mind. And then instead of running away, he was in the back of the theater, shaking hands with people, and he was kind and warm with everybody. And I just, you know, I've been around celebs my whole life, but there's certain people that really touch me. And I walked over and introduced myself, and he had that very warm smile and that kind heart of his. And, you know, that was the first time we met. And then we found out that he's a longtime friend of my cousin. And it's just been an honor. And when I talk to my other comedian buddies, you know, about Tom, you know, he's a guy who holds court. You know, you gotta be in his presence to really enjoy who he is. So Tom, it's such a real honor and a joy to have you on here. And I'm so grateful.
Thank you. I'm happy to do it. You know, I turned down, you know, Larry King and all those other people. I said, no, I got to talk. You know, David Letterman's calling me to do. I said, no, I don't have time. You know, so I set this time aside for you.
Tom, you're amazing. Tom does movies with Clint Eastwood. He's very good friends with Clint, and probably what I call the good guys of the industry. And I won't explain that on this call. But he's friends with a lot of the good guys of the entertainment industry. And he's a very interesting guy. So, Tom, you had a silver spoon in your mouth, right? You grew up and you came up with multimillionaire parents and all that other stuff, right?
Yeah. Donald Trump was so envious of my childhood to try to compete with me. No, you know the story. It's in my book. You know, the book I wrote that's out now called "Still Standing: My Journey from Streets and Saloons to the Stage and Sinatra." But in the book, it explains I had 8 brothers and sisters. We lived in a shack in a suburb of Chicago called Harvey, Illinois. Harvey was a blue-collar town, steel mills and factories. They made everything from clutch plates to crankshafts, and there was the Whiting Corporation, Faralloy Corporation, Bliss and Laughlin, Ingalls and Shepherd, Perfection Gear, all these factories that the people worked in. And then there were like 37 taverns in the town as well. So the people they worked in Harvey, shopped in Harvey, and banked in Harvey. And it was a thriving little metropolis in those days. But I was a raggedy poor kid. I had holes in my shoes, and I would take my shoe shine box and I would go to all the taverns in the snow, you know, in the wintertime, and I'd shine shoes trying to make money to help feed my brothers and sisters. While I was in those taverns, Frank Sinatra was in all the jukeboxes. That's what the book is really about. It's about a little boy from Harvey, Illinois, who's on his hands and knees shining shoes in a bar, and Sinatra's singing on the jukebox. And that little boy from Harvey, Illinois flash forward to the end of the book, he carries Frank Sinatra's coffin out of a church in Beverly Hills, California. And I also spoke at the funeral. So it's a journey. That's why it's called my journey from streets and saloons to the stage and Sinatra. You know. So, and all the struggles. The book is called Still Standing because I'm still standing. I've been knocked down in my life so many times, physically, as it points out in the book, as well as literally, just knocked down. But I kept getting back up. And I've been a stand-up comedian for 50 years, so it's a double entendre. I'm still standing. And now I'm on your show, and it's all downhill after this, you know.
Tom gets on stage, and he's so elegant. If you ever get a chance to see him live, please do, because he's spectacular. There's a royalty about Tom that I used to watch on the Tonight Show and then on the Letterman Show that was just so fun to watch, where a lot of comedians, and we had this chat the other day on the phone, a lot of comedians are very uptight, very peculiar people, you know, eccentric people. Tom's just a regular, down-to-earth, nice guy. It's a very unusual thing. Being around comedians, you know, for a lot of my life, I've seen some real strange people. And that's not Tom Dreesen. Tom is just a down-to-earth, nice guy.
Thank you. This is my humble opinion. In my 50 years in show business, I've come to the conclusion that 85% of all stand-up comedians are insecure, neurotic, sometimes psychotic, loved, starved wrecks, absolute total wrecks. And the other 15% are gifted, confident people who say, I know how to write a joke and I know how to tell a joke. I like to think that I'm in the latter, but never trust somebody that tells you they're sane, you know. But the difference between me and them, and that's why I give motivation speeches to comedians called The Joy of Stand-Up Comedy and How to Get There. My poor childhood, I don't regret it 1 second of it. You know, I think it's the greatest thing that ever happened to me, and because all of life is about perception. And by the way, that's my motivation talks are on 4 subjects: perception, visualization, self-talk, and develop a sense of humor. And I elaborate on those 4 points. But when I talk to you know, comedians, the difference between my career and their career is the 4 years I spent in the military. While I was in the military, because I came from alcoholic parents and came from a poor childhood, all psychiatrists would tell you, this boy's going to end up in jail. This boy's going to end up, you know, in disaster. And I think that's BS. I think that you have the choice. So I started reading every book I could find on positive mental attitude when I was in the service. You know, Norman Vincent Peale, The Power of Positive Thinking, A Guide to Confident Living, Psycho-Cybernetics, Maxwell Maltz, all the Joseph Murphy's books, like and the Clement Stone, Positive Mental Attitude. But a book that changed my life was called The Power of Your Subconscious Mind. And because I started putting these principles and exercises into my life, it changed my course. And that's what I try to help the other comedians with. I tell the young kids, if you're an insecure, neurotic, love-starved wreck, when you're poor and unknown, when you're rich and famous, it doesn't get better, it gets worse. Because you thought rich and famous was going to take away all this angst. So you need to go here. The inner journey is far more exciting than the outer journey, you know, and that's the journey you have to take before you get on the stardom. You know, first of all, work on your craft. All those other, I give those principles: how to write a joke, stage presence that you talked about. I was fortunate that I toured with Sammy Davis Jr. and Smokey Robinson and Frank Sinatra and worked with Dean Martin. I watched the best walk out on that stage. I watched the greatest entertainer of all time, Frank Sinatra. That's subjective, I know, but it's not arguable that he's the greatest pop singer of all time and had probably arguably the greatest show business career of all time. But to watch him walk out in front of 20,000 people or 40,000 people and take total command of that stage, you know, before he sang a note, before he even sang one note, he just electrified that audience. And all these people, 20,000 people in the arena, he would bring them all down. Like all of a sudden, the guy in the furthest seat up there was in a bar with Frank, and Frank was singing to him, you know. But anyhow, so these are I went all over the place with that answer. But my journey is a little bit different than most comedians, that I worked on the mental part of of your life. You know, and I'll close this long conversation with this. We're governed by two energies our whole life. When I was reading all these positive mental attitude books, I kept hearing about yin and yang. I couldn't understand what is yin and yang, you know, the yin and yang. And I began to realize what they were talking about is that we are two energies, our ego and our spirit. Call it what you want, your Holy Spirit, your center, whatever. Now, we aren't born ego, we're born pure spirit. When we're born pure spirit. We don't know if we're a black or white, Jew or Gentile, you know, we don't know what we are, boy or girl. We're just a spirit, and we love everything that loves us. So we gravitate to all this love, and we love back. Well-intentioned adults, sometimes misinformed, start programming our computer. Little boys do this, little girls do this, our Catholics do this, our Jewish people do this. You know, by the time you're 4 or 5 years old, you're starting to develop an image of yourself based upon their information, sometimes misinformed, you know. But nonetheless, that's the ego is being formed. And the rest of your life, your energies are torn between your ego and your spirit. Your ego and your spirit. Now, your ego has an insatiable appetite. It can't get enough fame, money, power, fortune. It just can't get enough. It will drive you one day to destruction because it can't get enough. It has an insatiable appetite. Your spirit, conversely, is like that song of the 70s by the Hollies. All I need is the air that I breathe and to love you. That's all your spirit needs. So you're torn between these two energies. Example, you're driving down the street and a guy pulls out of his driveway in front of you and you slam on your brakes and you start cursing at him. You son, you know, blah, blah, you know, this is my space, this is my car, and you interfere. You know, that's your ego. Your spirit says, oh my God, am I glad that he's not hurt and I'm not hurt. Have a good day, buddy. That's what your spirit is. So we have to try to go to that spirit more often than that ego. And I fight like everybody else. Sometimes I'll be reacting to something and I have to pull myself back and, whoa, that's my ego. My spirit doesn't feel that at all. So that's a long story, a long answer to a short question.
Oh, that's wonderful. I've been involved in self-development for a long time. But, you know, when they first started talking to me about personal growth, I thought they were talking about a tumor.
Yeah.
But that changed.
Gee, I wish I had
Anyway,
a drum so I could give you a rim shot. Good one there.
This is actually on a snare drum right now. I'm talking to you out of, it's the truth. It's the God's honest truth. Now, you were part of the civil rights movement. You and Tim formed a partnership, a comedic partnership that was really one of the first black-white partnerships in comedy and actually in show business. Can you share a little bit of how that came to be?
Yeah, we weren't actually involved in a civil rights movement, but it turned out that way. Tim Reed and I were America's first black and white comedy team. History shows we were the last. For your viewers, if they don't know who Tim Reed is, he was on a show called WKRP Cincinnati. He also had another show called Simon and Simon. He was on a show called Sister, Sister. He played the father. He's been in many sitcoms. But before all that, he was never in show business, nor was I. I came out of the service. I was wandering aimlessly, going from job to job. Couldn't find what it was I was looking for, you know. And every job, I was not fulfilled. And I ended up getting married. I had one child and another child and another child. And I have a wife and 3 children. And I'm going from job to job. I joined a civic group called the JCs, the Junior Chamber of Commerce. They worked on civic projects, you know, helping the community, whatever was going wrong in the community. The JCs trained young men and young women of action. They call it men and women 18 to 36. And they taught you leadership training program and how to attack the problems of the community, learning how to serve on a committee, how to chair a committee, and by making the community a better place to live. And they were nationwide, international, as well as 50 states. So in Harvey, Illinois, I joined the JCs and I started working on civic projects. And one of the problems facing the community in those days, as it is today, were drugs in our youth. And I decided to do something about that. And I wrote a drug education program teaching grade school children the ills of drug abuse with humor. It's a concept I had. And at that time, they weren't teaching drug education at a college or a high school level, let alone at an elementary school level. So I was going to run it as a JC project, and I had it all formatted. And I was talking to the JCs one night at a general meeting, wanting them to sanction it. and approve of it. And at that meeting was a young black man who had just graduated from Norfolk State College. E.I. DuPont recruited him into Chicago as a marketing rep, this young black man named Tim Reed. After I made the proposal, he came up after it. He said, I'm a new member. I just joined. I'd like to work with you on that project. I said, gee, I already got a guy, but thank you. And I'll show you divine intervention. At that time, I was actually praying. I really was. I was praying. I said, God, what is it I'm supposed to be doing? This can't be it. I'd be wandering from job to job. Some nights I'd be in a bar at 2 o'clock in the morning with all my buddies, drinking beer, and I'm thinking, I don't belong here, but I didn't know where I belonged. So again, I'm praying, you know, God, show me the way. I don't know what it is I'm supposed to be doing. So when Tim Reed said, can I help you? I said, no, I got a guy. I had a white friend named John DeBoer. He was going to help me. So the next day, as fate would have it, or divine intervention, John DeBoer called me and said, I can't do that project with you, Tom. I got a new job. So I said, gee, what was that black guy's name? Oh, yeah, Tim Reed. I called Tim. He agreed to do it. We worked on the project for a month or so, and then we went into the school, the classrooms. And the program became, the moment I walked into that classroom with Tim, I realized what a blessing this was, because the children were black and white. All the schools were integrated. So when a young black and a young white guy walked in that, you know, we played a lot of music. We got the kids going. You remember the song, Oh, the Games People Play Now, Every Night and Every Day Now, that song by Joe South. You know, we would play that record to start it. And we'd say, that's what we came here today for, to tell you about some games people are playing in our community. And we'd joke off of one another, get the kids laughing. And then we planted the seeds of the ills of drug abuse. One day, a little 8th grade girl, the program became very successful. One day, a little 8th grade girl walking out of the classroom stopped by Tim and I, and she said, you guys are funny. You ought to become a comedy team. A little 8th grade girl. And the thought of a black-white comedy team intrigued us. No one had ever done that before. So, you know, we started writing what we thought was material. Now, mind you, there were no comedy clubs in those days. None in America at that time. So we ended up working all black clubs in the North and the South, what they affectionately called the Chitlin Circuit, black-owned, black-operated nightclubs. The 20 Grand in Detroit, the High Chaparral in Chicago, the Sugar Shack in Boston, the Club Harlem in Atlantic City before they had gambling. It was a regular circuit, black-owned, black-operated clubs, nightclubs. And then we worked all white nightclubs too. Eventually we worked the Playboy circuit too. So, you know, we were groundbreakers at that time. You got to remember, the Vietnam War was raging. You know, I had gotten out of the service. Vietnam War was raging. Students were protesting all over America. African Americans were rioting in every major city in America, including, by the way, Harvey, Illinois had one of the largest riots in the country where I grew up at. In the middle of all this, Tim and I are going around the country trying to make people laugh. We went everywhere there was racial tension. We did high schools, we did colleges, we did 11 prisons in 1 year. We did county jails. Anywhere there was tension, we would go, not preach, we would go perform, trying to make people laugh. And I'll close with this, that Tim and I stayed together 6 years, and we wrote a book called Tim and Tom, an American Comedy in Black and White, that may become a series now that people are talking about it, or a feature film, whatever, but mostly we hope it's a 6 hour or 1 hour series. But I've been in show business 50 years. I've got awards like any other entertainer for all these years, which mean hardly anything to me. I appreciate it. But the one thing I took away from the 6 years that Tim and I were together, I can't tell you how many times, wherever we went, after doing a show, some young black guy would come up to us and say, you know, I got a white friend and I want to reach out to him. But if I do, the brothers are going to wear me out. But after watching you and Tim today, having so much fun, I'm going to reach out to my white friend. And then a white kid would come up to us sometimes and say, you know, I got a black friend and I want to reach out to him, but the white guy's going to give me a bad time. You know, because in those days, you didn't see a black guy and a white guy walking down the street together, let alone on the stage together. But the white kid would say, but I'm going to reach out to my black friend. That happened to us more than you'll ever know. And it sounds like humble BS, but it's true. That means more to me. And I know to Tim than anything else that we could ever achieve in show business, if we had some bridge in that. And we're the best friends to this day. The team split up after 6 years, and it wasn't me splitting it up. Tim wanted to split up the team. It's a long story. A woman came in, and it's in our book, as a matter of fact, but and caused him to leave his wife, and he ended up on the West Coast, and you know, and it devastated me because I had never been on stage alone, and what was I going to do? And I ended up, after Tim and I split up, I had to go out alone and start all over again, you know. So anyhow, we are the best of friends today. And by the way, his children call me Uncle Tom. They've been calling me that for years.
Oh, that's very funny. That's
I'll
very
tell you,
funny.
let me tell you real quick. Let me tell you a real quick story, then we'll go on another. we're doing a book tour years ago, and we go to Norfolk State College where he had graduated, and it's historically a black college. Now, we're having a buffet before we're going to speak to the students. And at the buffet are 7 black college professors and me getting something to eat. And Tim's daughter, Tori, had not seen me for a year. And she came in the door and she saw me, and I'm clear across from, and I've known her before she was born. I knew her, you know, the day she was born. And she sees me, and she hadn't seen me for a year, and she's hollering, Uncle Tom, Uncle Tom, Uncle Tom. She's yelling. Now these 7 black college professors turned around and looked at her, and I said, she's talking to me, you know.
That's very funny. That's for, you know, I know something else that's very near and dear to your heart that really touches me, is that you're a very charitable man, Tom. I know that on Thanksgiving you go to the Laugh Factory and you feed the people that are homeless for Thanksgiving. And who do you go there with? Gary Sinise, and who else is there with you?
No, every Thanksgiving and every Christmas, Jamie Masada, the owner of the Laugh Factory in Hollywood, he also owns the Laugh Factory.
I know him well.
He owns one in Long Beach and in Vegas, and he owns a Laugh Factory in Chicago. But in Hollywood, every year, Thanksgiving and Christmas, he feeds the homeless, and it's all the comedians. Gary Sinise and I we do shows for the troops, but Gary doesn't come to that. But we feed the homeless, and it'll be, you know, all the comics, you know, I mean, the comics of today, the young comics, Dane Cook and Tiffany Haddish and myself and Tim Allen, and gee, I'll leave out some people. There's so many, all the comedians come, and they get up on stage, and what we do is we feed the homeless, and then after they're finished eating, each comic does about 5 or 6 minutes. And then we have a 1 o'clock feeding, a 3 o'clock feeding, a 5 o'clock feeding, and a 7 o'clock feeding. And it's gratifying for me, especially because after the team split up, the comedy team split up, I ended up on the West Coast. My wife and kids were back in Chicago. My wife ended up writing me a Dear John. She didn't want show business. She hated it. She wanted me out of the business. We ended up getting back together and then divorced years later. But at that time, I was on my rear end. I was house sitting, and then I couldn't do that anymore. The people came back. Now I had no place to go. I'm trying to get on at the Comedy Store. I'm trying to make it as a stand-up comedian. I'm trying to get to the Tonight Show, but I had to first get on at the Comedy Store. So I ended up sleeping in an old Nash Rambler, an abandoned car that was up on blocks. Where the old Nash Ramblers, the front seat came down. It was like my bed. I stayed in that car for 30 days, washing up in a gas station every morning, hitchhiking up and down Sunset Boulevard, begging to work for free at the Comedy Store every night. I lived on $1 a day. I ate only once a day. Kentucky Colonel had a thing called corn and cluck for under $1. It was 2 pieces of chicken, some coleslaw, and some potatoes, and it was 99 cents, you know. So going through all that, you know, I so identified with these people that are out on the street, you know, that luck ran out, you know. And so that's why it was very gratifying for me to feed the homeless every year, but also gratifying of Jamie Masada, who paid for all that, by the way, you know, and he does every year.
Oh, he's a wonderful guy. I met him at Mark Schiff's son Eli's bar mitzvah, and I got a chance to spend time with him and mad about you. You know who I'm talking about.
Yeah. Great
guy also. But yeah, Jamie is a really good man, and I mean, you just had such a good heart. You know, your charitable heart is wonderful, and I would feel very bad if I didn't encourage you to tell the story about the camera when you came off stage with Frank and Frank Jr.
Oh, that's it. Yeah. Well, no, you know what happened? That's a funny story. But I'm going to get that straight. But I just want to say, when you say about being charitable, something happened to me when I was a child that I never forgot. Every Thanksgiving and every Christmas, the civic groups in Harvey would come to the shack that we lived in, and they would bring the moose, the koalas, the elks, the B'nai B'rith. They would bring baskets of fruit and turkey and stuff that walnuts and stuff that my brothers and sisters and I had never seen. They would bring it to the shack, and my proud Irish mother would say, "No, we can't accept that. My husband has a job. We can't accept that." And this, two things resonated in my mind my whole life. Number one, first of all, us kids were trying to get around the door to get to that. We thought that was something we had never seen before. But my mother would say, no, my husband has a job. We don't deserve that. But two things always stuck in mind. Number one, that wasn't, my mother was right. He had a job and he should have been taking care of us. But number two, that wasn't the government coming to feed us. That was the people of the community. All the people of the community, you know, that would, and it taught me something in those days. And that's why I worked for charity all my life, because I remember as a kid how those people would do that. If you leave the American people alone, they won't let people in their neighborhood starve. The worst thing that ever happened was all this overwhelming welfare. You know, welfare was supposed to be temporary till you got on your feet. You know, but to be 6 generations, it's actually, to me, imprison people. You know,
Yes, I agree.
When I was growing up, we were taught, there was a mantra in my neighborhood: you only deserve in life what you work for. That's why I had a shoe shine box when I was a little boy. That's why I set pins in bowling alleys. That's why I caddied in the summertime. That's why I had a paper route, and I sold newspapers on the corner as well. I mean, that's, as a little boy, 8 years old, you started doing that, you know, and my brothers and sisters. So that's, I just wanted to digress to that. The story you're talking about.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. But I got to tell you, I would feel really terrible if I didn't get you to tell that story, because I've heard a lot of your stories, but that one with you, Frank, and Frank Jr. is hilarious.
Well, I think the picture's in the book, but I wish I had the 8x10. If I knew you were going to ask me that, I would show it. But what happens is every night, you know, first of all, when Frank Sinatra and I worked big arenas, you know, 20,000 seaters, I would go on and I would be on for like 45 minutes, and they would take an intermission, and then Frank would come on. But when we worked casinos, when we worked Atlantic City, Las Vegas, Tahoe, Reno, anywhere where we worked the casinos, I would do my show. I'm looking for that picture right back. I would do my show, and then after I finished, I'd say, good night, everybody, and I would walk off. So the band would play me off, and Frank Sinatra would, as I was walking off stage, we would crisscross. He would walk past me. I would be walking off stage, and he would be entering the stage, you know, and people would be just screaming and cheering for him. And anyhow, I don't have that picture in the book. I'll be darned. I thought it was in the book. Well, anyhow. So anyhow, Frank would get to center stage, and I'd be off stage, and he'd say, people would be cheering. He'd say, Tommy Dreesen, ladies and gentlemen, Tommy Dreesen. Tommy, come back and take another bow. Tommy Dreesen, there he is. There's my man. And I would take what they call a half bow. I'd never walk up to him. I'd just go halfway up. I would bow to the audience, and I would wave to Frank. And then he would start the show. That happened every night. Every night, everywhere. After about 10 years, to show you what kind of a good friend he was to me, because Frank Sinatra, you never fooled with the show. You want to drink all night with him, you want to party all night, fine. Showtime, everybody better know their job, because he knew his. And you had to, you know, the show, you didn't mess up the show. But I had been with him for so many years, and I had so much fun with him. This particular night, before I went on stage, one of the stagehands said, could I get a picture with you, Mr. Dreesen? It was closing night. I said, yeah, sure. And he took a picture. He had a little small camera. There weren't cell phones in those days. So he took a little small camera. I said, he took a picture. I said, could I use your camera? He said, and I took it out on stage with me. And at the end of the show, I was goofing with the audience. There was like 1,800 people in the audience in Atlantic City. And I took I told the audience, I said, you know, I hate entertainers who patronize audiences with all the BS. You know, you're a great audience, but I got to be honest with you. This is the best audience that I've ever had in all my years in show business. And I'm BSing them. I said, really, I don't want to forget you. And they're like laughing and knowing I'm BS. I said, do you mind if I get a picture? And I take this little tiny camera, and I'm going to take a picture of the audience. And I go, can you get in a little bit closer? You know, no.
It's funny.
Yeah, I got this camera. Now, when I finish my show, I go off stage, and I still got the camera. Frank calls me back out. And this time, now the band is vamping, because Frank Jr. is conducting. And Frank Jr. was dead serious. You never hardly saw him smile. He was serious about the show. So when Frank comes out, they're vamping. Bonham, Bonham, Bonham. And Frank said, come on back, Tommy, take another bow. This night, I walked straight up to him. I had never done that in 10 years. Now, he looked at me, his eyes got about this big, and he's going, what are you doing? The band's still vamping. Bonham, Bonham. I said, could I ask you a favor? He said, I'm trying to start the show. I said, could I get a picture? He goes, you believe this guy? He says to the audience, you believe this guy? He said, I'm trying to start my show. He wants a picture. He said, all right. I handed him the camera. I said, get a picture of me and Frank Jr., will you? And I put my arms around Frank Jr. Now, I've got a great picture that I show in my one-man show. A lady in the audience took the picture, and she sent it to me. And it shows Frank holding the camera in his hand and my arms around Frank Jr., and it shows Frank. And I say, you'll notice that's a camera in his left hand, but that's not a smile on his face, But he took the picture, and I got the picture that he took of Frank Jr. and I hanging on the wall. I should get it for you. It's right over, but never mind. I won't do it. Anyhow, and there's the biggest grin on Frank Jr.'s face, because he said under his breath, and I can't swear in front of all these ladies, but he said under his breath, he's going to effing kill you. But he did, he did. The reason why I tell that story all the time, and I do it in my one-man show, it shows the relationship I had with this wonderful, wonderful man. People were always afraid of his temper because he had that Sicilian temper. And I had made up my mind. I had seen him sometimes go off on people. And I had made up my mind that if that ever happens to me, I was going to walk up to him, shake his hand, and say, thanks, Frank. I can't tell you how great it is being with you. Because I wasn't going to let that happen. I'm not a whipping boy. Frank, the one thing I think you respected me for, I'm a street kid. I don't have a degree from academia, but I got a doctorate from the streets. I grew up on the streets. And I love Frank Sinatra, and I was a huge fan. I never let him know how much in awe of him I was. I picked up on that when I first started touring with him, that, I don't know, maybe from being a bartender, I pick up on certain personalities. He didn't want another fan. He had millions of fans. He didn't want somebody gushing over him all the time. And I felt like anybody else. I wanted to say to him some nights, when you were in From Here to Eternity, and when you did that movie, The Manchurian Candidate, or, tonight on stage when you sang that song, I was like any other fan, but I never said that to him. And that's why he became, when we were alone in the car at night, he never went to bed till the sun came up, wherever we went, whether on the road or off the road. When the sun came up, Frank went to bed. So, when we got in the car alone, there were nights that after riding around for a little while, I was a kid from the streets in Harvey, Illinois, and he was a kid from the streets in Hoboken. And that was our relationship,
Remarkable. I do love that story, though. I've told that story to several people. It's such a great story. It showed that you had some guts to go out and take that chance too. But and I find I didn't know what to do when I met you. I've known so many celebrities and rock stars in my life, being a drummer and playing with everybody. But I really was in awe when I met you, because you're such an artisan when it comes to comedy, and how warm and friendly and open you were was such a relief, because you meet a lot of people that are really by their own press, and through the years that I've known you, you've always been such a kind, compassionate guy, and I guess your background brought you to that. But Tom, can you give us maybe some tips or some techniques? Now, you kind of talked a little bit about, you got yourself, involved in personal development and stuff like that, which is remarkable. Maybe you can give some steps to people that are new to all this, to success.
Everybody, there are so many things. What's the secret? What's the secret of a positive mental attitude? What's the secret of success? And I always, after I give my motivation talks, I'll say, and I close it with, I'm going to tell you, I start out with, I'm going to tell you the secret. You're going to learn the secret today. And then I talk about, as I told you earlier, perception, visualization, self-talk, develop a sense of humor. Excuse me. But at the end, I say, and here's the secret, folks. The secret is you. You're the secret. It's there. If I say to anybody in America, I want you to get physically fit, they say, I know how to do that, one word. Excuse me. I say, I want you to get mentally fit. They'll go, duh. One word, exercise. If you're physically fit, you exercise. If you want to get mentally fit, you exercise. You exercise the mind the way you exercise the body. This is the vehicle you were given, this vehicle right here. You're in charge of this universe. This is your universe. A man wrote a book years ago, I think it was Ogmandino, called Three Magic Words. No, his name was U.S. Anderson. excuse me, he wrote a book called Three Magic Words. And the three magic words are, you are God. That's the three magic words. You are God of this universe. If you believe there's a God of the entire universe, your belief, you're the God of this universe. This is universe you were given, you know. So you're God of this universe. If I took a glass of water, and I do it in my classroom sometimes with the kids, and I'll pour dirt in the water, and I'll stir up the dirt in the water, and I'll say to anybody, drink this. Come on, drink this. No one will drink it. I say, you won't drink dirt. Why would you think dirt? If you won't ingest filth in this body, you won't ingest filth here. Why would you ingest filth in this part of your body? Negative thoughts are dirt. They swirl in the universe. We can't stop them from entering our minds, but we don't have to let them grow in our minds. I think of the mind, and I tell them, as a garden. It's a beautiful garden, your mind. Now, if you want to plant positive thoughts, say like flowers, if you're going to plant flowers, and you do, and weeds grow, would you allow the weeds to grow? You'd dig out the weeds and replant flowers. Positive thoughts. There's mental exercises. There's a great book by Shad Helmstetter called What to Say When You Talk to Yourself. And it basically is the most important person you'll ever talk to is yourself. So, you know, I have mantras sometimes like day by day in every way, I'm getting better and better. When I was going through health problems, and you'll read that in the book, the last chapter, it was a very serious thing in my life. But recovering, I kept saying, day by day, in every way, I'm getting better and better. Every time a negative thought would say, oh gosh, if this doesn't happen, I'm getting ill. I'd say, well, day by day, in every way, I'm getting better and better. I'm in charge of this universe. If a negative thought came in my mind, I'd cast it out and replace it with a positive thought. You know, my mind is constantly in tune with the positive. It is bright, cheerful, enthusiastic, and full of good, positive thoughts and ideas. That's that would be my Monday mantra. You know, and then I'd have a Tuesday. I'd put them on 3x5 cards, keep them in my car. I'd be stopped at a stop sign. Let me explain. You ever notice that you're in a good mood? You're driving along in a car or whatever it is, you're in a good mood, and all of a sudden you feel sad, and you go, what the hell? I was just in a good mood. And you go, oh yeah, I thought about that thing, that incident that happened with Dorothy, or that incident that happened with Bill, and whatever it was, that one thought changed the chemistry in your body. You were in a good mood. That one thought changed your chemistry. Well, if one thought can change the chemistry to the negative, then maybe a thought can change it to a positive, the chemistry to a positive. So you're in control of that. You know, you're in control of that. You know, that you can, if you can control your thoughts, you can control your feelings, you know. And by the way, and you have to do it every day. If you went to a doctor and the doctor said to you, okay, Francis, a man of your age, your height, your weight, and your size, we're going to put you on this program. And 6 months later, you came back in and you were perfectly physically fit for a man your age, your weight, your height, your size. He said, you're in perfectly good for condition now, Francis. Does that mean you never have to exercise again? You could walk out the door and it'd be all over? No, you have to continue that. So we have to exercise mentally every day the way we exercise physically every day. There's a lot of books that can teach you those thoughts, you know, those mantras, you know. And every time you think negative, that's okay. Don't panic. We all do that. Say, wait, what am I doing here now? Hold on. I don't want to think like that. You know, other people's words have no power over you unless you allow them to have power. Your own negative thoughts have no power over you unless you allow them to have power. You know, you have to give those negative thoughts permission to stay in your mind. You can't stop them from entering your mind, but you do have to give them permission to let them grow and stay in your mind. So the secret is you.
Very powerful, Tom. Boy, oh boy. Very concise, very powerful. Really, really awesome. You know, I know the comedy side of you. I didn't know the inspirational, educational side of you. And that's equally as powerful. So that's been great. Katrina, do you think, is there anybody that would like to ask Tom a question?
Francis, we can definitely open it up. If anybody has a question, please unmute yourself. And Tom, I'll start with a question. I've always got a question. I really enjoyed your going through the taking charge of our thoughts in order to affect our well-being. I think that's been a challenge for a lot of us during this COVID experience that we're having. And so it's very timely for you to share that. And thank you for that. So when you think about what was it that kept you moving forward with each of the changes that you encountered throughout your life, what was there one thing that kept you on track that you can share, or some things that pop into your mind?
Well, you know, first of all, go with the foundation. Every home that's strong and is going to last for a long time has to have a good foundation, as we all know. When I was 6 years old, my mother sent me to Catholic school. And because my father was alcoholic, he was never like a father to me. He was a good guy. He was a docile guy. Alcohol was his master, you know. And so we never went walking together, fishing together, hunting together, none of that kind of stuff. You know, he never saw me ever playing a game till years later. He saw me in one game, but in sports stuff. So he wasn't real like a father I could go to. So when I went to school, the nuns kept teaching about we had a father in heaven, you know, that there's a father in heaven. And I thought as a little boy, 6 years old, wow, that I could, and you've prayed to this father and he will help you. Well, that was fascinating. And so as I believe like a little boy believes, and I've read years later that you enter the gates of heaven when you have the faith of a child, you know, like the mustard seed thing, you know. So I always had that no matter what went on in my life, and I had so many hardships that you read in the book, you know, but I don't consider them hardships or failures. All of them were blessings because all of them took me to this place. You know, I'm the happiest guy in the world. I make a living at what I love to do, making people laugh. So that foundation that I did believe in a higher power. A lot of people don't. That's your, you know, up to you. But I believe there was a higher power that I could go. And whenever I was confused and didn't know what to do, I would pray, say, show me the way, show me the way. And that's helped me throughout the years, that sort of thing. The other thing is I put into practice these principles. And when I tell you that I lecture on 4 subjects: perception, visualization, self-talk, and develop a sense of humor. Perception. All of life is about perception. Okay, it's how you perceive it. And I always give this example. A little boy goes in a backyard with a bat and a ball. And he said, I'm the greatest hitter in the world. And he throws a ball up in the air and he swings and he misses. He said, I'm the greatest hitter in the world. He throws it up the second time and he swings and he misses. He said, I am the greatest hitter in the world. He throws it up the third time and he swings and he misses. He said, I'm the greatest pitcher in the world.
That's funny. That's very funny.
Nothing changed with his perception. All of life is about perception. It's now the COVID down here. Oh my God, this has been too drastic for a lot of them. But on the other hand, it's how you perceive it. You know, say during the perception, you know, I start reading this book. I read more now than I have before. I start reading this book on positive mental attitude. Or, you know, I all of a sudden, I've always loved my family and my friends. But I got to tell you something, I love them more now than I ever have. I really realize how important they are to me. Or the other thing is, do you know how much I love hugging my grandchildren? Do you know how much I love hugging my children? And I haven't been able to do that. When the day comes that I can hug them again, oh, can you imagine how great that hug is going to feel? So there is, maybe God or somebody said, folks, we need to stop for a little while and rethink where you're going, you know. So it depends on how you perceive it. You can perceive this COVID, and it is a tough time in all of our lives, but you can perceive it also as a blessing. There are no failures in life. There just are no failures. If you believe that, you say, what did I learn from this? Every time I fell short and I would start cursing fate and complaining, and I'd stop and say, no, wait a minute. What did I learn from this? What can I do better the next time? So, you know, look, we're on a journey, all of us, folks. Every road we take isn't the destination. It's just another journey, that road, you know. Again, all of life is about how you perceive it. That was, again, a long answer to a short question, Katrina.
That was great. Perfect.
Oh, that was
All
great,
right.
Tom.
I think Steve Immer, you want to ask a question. Please go ahead.
Hey, hi, am I up? Am I audible?
You're
Yeah.
on. You're
Hey,
on.
Tom, this is wild. I've always wanted to have a real live chat in real time with a famous comedian, and this is amazing. It's happening right this minute. So once again, the magic of the universe. How can we get your book? I'd like to read, and I'm also wondering, are there any, besides your book, which I'm sure is terrific on the art of comedy, but did you have any other books that were kind of reference points for you when you were kind of learning your art and your craft of comedy?
Yes. Now, by the way, my book is still standing. You can get on Amazon.com, but it's not a motivational book. I would like to do that sometime in the future. This is just a book of my life, of the school of hard knocks and how I kept getting back up. But in hard work prevails, I guess you would get. Yeah, and then also the interesting stories about the wonderful people that I toured with and stuff. But when I first started out, and I tell young comedians this all the time, if you want to be whatever you want to be, study the masters. Say you want to be a brain surgeon. You wouldn't just study brain surgery. You would go watch the brain surgeons operate. So I read a lot of books on comedy. There's a book called The Great Comedians. I read many years ago. And it really, a guy named Larry Wilde. And by the way, this is a cheap plug, but Larry Wilde on the back of my book wrote a quote. He saw me perform one time, and he put excellent material, superb delivery, impeccable timing. Tom Dreesen is a quintessential comedian. Now, that's bragging, and forgive me, but I read his book, The Great Comedians, when I was starting out, and for him to say something, I felt like I'd come full circle, you know, because his book helped me. It was all these comedians, Jack Benny and Joey Bishop and Milton Berle. Everyone had a chapter of what they thought young comedians should know, or what they felt about comedy. That book really helped me a lot. And then I went to watch other comedians perform. Like Francis was talking about the Laugh Factory. I can't tell you how many times I go there and I try out new material. I'm always going there on weekends trying out new material. And I can't tell you how many times there'll be like 10 or 12 new young comedians, men and women in the audience. They came to watch other comedians perform. And I you know, that's what you do. To whatever, if you want to be if you want to be, say, a doctor or an engineer or whatever you want, find somebody in your community that is that, and go to them and say, I one day would like to do what you're doing. Would you help me? What I found out through the years is 99 out of 100 will say yes. They'll find time for you that they remember when they started out. When I was brand new, I had been in the business 4 months. I snuck into a club one time where Mort Sahl was performing. It was called Mr. Kelly's in Chicago. And I snuck backstage, and I was really nervous, and I knocked on his dressing room door, and I thought his manager or somebody was going to answer the door. But Mort Sahl answered the door. He was all alone in his dressing room. He said, yeah. I said, my name is Tom Dreesen, Mr. Sahl, and I'm a brand new comedian. I would love to have some of your advice. He said, come on in. And he talked to me for almost 2 hours before the next show. And he gave me such great advice. He gave me how to write jokes and stuff like that. I left there on cloud 9. I said to myself, if ever I make it in this business of stand-up comedy and a young comedian comes up to me, I'm never going to forget this night, how great he made me feel. And he treated me like an equal, not like he treated me like a peer, not like a new kid. He said, you know how we comedians are, Tom, we do this. And I'm thinking, this guy is saying, we comedians? I've been doing it 4 months, but I never forgot that feeling. And I try to share that with other young comedians, you know.
Oh, that's so nice. That's just, well, you know, I think that anybody gets to meet you one-to-one, Tom, walks away a little bit better. Just because, you know, you're such a kind-hearted guy and very generous with who you are. Unlike some of the comics that we know. You and I know some comics that are pretty shut down, and, you know, that 85%. But, you know, you meet Ray Romano, very open-hearted guy. Jerry Seinfeld, if he's in a good mood that day. Some of these, Steve Middleman, my gosh, yeah. Mitty, one of my best friends, you know, for over 20 years. But by the way, he sends his regards. He said, Tom is a comics comic. I said, no question about it.
How about, you know, yeah. I gave a motivation speech to comedians in New York one time, and Steve was in that class, or in that group, and he always, I taught them, it's a conversation, not a presentation. And if I see Steve and he'll look at me, he'll say, conversation, not presentation. So he took away that. Yeah, that Emerson said, "You've lived a good life if you leave this world better than you found it." And I think that's something to think about whenever somebody comes up and asks you for some advice, whatever you're doing, or for some help. you know, you just never know what that little bit of advice or that little bit of encouragement will do to that person, that person will do to another person. Pay it forward and pay it forward. Mitch Albom wrote a book called The 5 People You Meet in Heaven. It was a fascinating book, and it was 5 people you had no idea that you even helped. You had no idea that some kind deed you did, that one morning you're on your way to get the newspaper at the corner, and you did some kind deed for somebody, and that person passed it on to someone else, and passed it on to someone else, and passed it, and that person, and they kept paying it forward, and this person found the cure to cancer or something. I don't know. You know, we don't know all that. You know, I really do believe sometimes that we're all here for some design. There's some magical design, and we all interact with one another, and that moves on. And especially kind deeds, you know, move forward. And you know,
yeah.
And by
it's a
the
big
way,
ripple effect, isn't it, Tom? It's a big ripple effect.
Well, Frank Sinatra, by the way, was one of the most benevolent human beings I ever met in my life. Frank Sinatra did more for charity than you'll ever know. There were things he did privately that he didn't want anybody to know. You know, and I can give you a couple examples, but I think there was a book many years ago called The Magnificent Obsession by Lloyd C. Douglas. Its predecessor was a book called Dr. Hudson's Secret Journal. And they later made a movie about the magnificent obsession, but it's basically biblical that if you want to succeed in any endeavor in life, and you pray, you say, oh God, I just want to do this. And you have to believe, ask and you shall receive. Ask, you have to really believe that you're going to receive. And then, you know, once you believe that with all your heart that it's going to happen, then you have a chore. You have to help his less fortunate children with some gift that you can do, either with your skills. So if once you believe that it's going to happen for you, then you have to keep your eyes and ears open for his less fortunate children, someone who needs a helping hand. And you have to help them, and they may not know it. You have to do it privately and quietly, so they don't know it. And if you do that, within 30 days, your master will reward you towards your endeavor. And if the other person has to know, then you got to swear them to secrecy and say, I'll do this for you, but you must not tell anybody, and you can't pay me back. You have to pay it forward. But promise me you won't tell anybody, because then it doesn't work. The magic doesn't work. So anyhow, Frank Sinatra did that his whole life. You had to be very careful around Frank Sinatra. You couldn't say, gee, that's a nice watch. He'd take it off and give it to you. You couldn't say, gee, that's a beautiful painting. He'd take it off the wall and give it to you. Coming out of the Waldorf Astoria in New York many years ago, we were going to do a show. We were going out the back entrance, because if Frank went out the front, he'd be mobbed. We're rushing out the back. There's a limousine there, and the security is rushing us to the limousine. And a woman jumped out of the doorway. The doorman told me she had been there for over 5 hours. She started screaming, Mr. Sinatra, please, Mr. Sinatra, please, Mr. Sinatra. He was getting in the limo, and finally he turned around, and the security was holding her back. He got out of the limo, and he walked up, and he said, what is it? She said, my husband is home ill. He's very, very ill. If I could get an autograph from him, it would mean the world to me. And he said, sure. He's signing the autograph. She said, oh, what beautiful cufflinks. They were well over $1,000. I know where he got them from. He said, thank you very much. And he finished the autograph, and he took the cufflinks off, and he handed them to her. And he said, give these to your husband. She said, oh, no, I didn't want them. I just was admiring them. He said, no, I want your husband to have these. Now we get in the limousine, and I say to him, Frank, that was beautiful. But why did you do that? He said, Tommy, if you possess something that you can't give away, then you don't possess it. It possesses you.
Oh, wow.
Not only talked that talk, he walked that talk. He later told me, he said, Tommy, it's Aristotle Onassis, multi-billionaire. The second he died, that wasn't his private jet, that wasn't his yacht, that wasn't his mansions. It all transfers. Nothing we own is ours. We're only using it, Tommy. It isn't ours. You know, and he said, you know, that again, it's just a transfer the second you die. So we're only using all this stuff. And he meant that about money too. He was very generous, you know, which is a funny story of all time. He was coming out of Mame San restaurant. He would give $100 tip. If you brought him a pack of Camels, he gave you $100. If you brought him a Jack Daniels, Jack in the Splash, you got $100. He's coming out of Mame San restaurant, and the valet parker pulled up with his car. And the joke is that he said to the valet parker, what's the biggest tip you ever got? And the kid said $100. And Frank took 2 $100 bills and gave it to him. And he said, by the way, who gave you the $100? He said, you did last Friday, Mr. Sinatra.
Wow, that's funny. Yeah, I've heard a lot of different stories about mixed stories about Frank Sinatra, but you know, mostly benevolent ones. And of course, it's great that he was so good to you. And of course, you deserve it. You're one of those people. Katrina, how much longer do we have here?
Francis, I think this is probably where we wrap it up. Tom, it has been such a pleasure. I could speak with you all day long, hear your stories, and enjoy being in your presence.
Katrina, I feel bad. I think that says Cathy Stubbs over there. I think he had a question.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Good catch. Cathy, Richard.
Thank you. It's beautiful, Tom. Really, really beautiful. I probably brought up in the same situation as yourself, you know, big family and all. I mean, we were so poor. We had to save up to be poor. But the question was, because you're friends of Frank Sinatra and everything, and I've asked the question many times when I've come to America. I'm being in America now. Nobody's actually given me the answer. And it's, why do they call a Big Apple a Big Apple?
You know what? If you research the Big Apple, it really came from the reason they call it that. It came from a horse race many years ago. The origin of that is the Big Apple was a horse race, something to do about a horse race. And you can go on the internet and find that. You know, why did they call it the Big Apple? But it had something to do with a horse race, and it had to do something with a columnist said something about, you'll never see that in the Big Apple again, or something like that. And then it became, you know, it was way back in the 1800s. They called New York the Big Apple. That's some kind of trivia question, you know. What your accent? Are you from Ireland?
No, England.
England. Oh, and what part of England?
Newcastle way.
Oh yeah. I used to do a show there called the Des O'Connor Show. It was a TV show, a chat show.
Yeah, I remember it. But he's a fantastic guy. Yeah, he's a bit like himself.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, they used to compare me with a comedian in England called Dave Allen. Was that his name, Dave Allen?
Beautiful guy as well. It's good to what you are. Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, because I used to do a lot of jokes about going to Catholic school, and he did the same. I guess he did the same kind of stuff. Yeah. I had a great time. I had a great time in London. I do every time I go to England. They treated me so good there. I just loved it there. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you.
Tom, the guy you're talking to, Richard, you know that I almost passed away from a heart condition. He came down and stayed with me for 2 weeks from Connecticut, and so I have a lot of gratitude for Richard because. Really, I don't know what would have happened to me for those 2 weeks, my first 2 weeks out of surgery without him. So, Tom, that's Richard Stubbs, an amazing man.
By the way, Richard, I play golf with a guy named Vinnie Jones. Do you know who Vinnie Jones is?
Oh, fantastic guy. I would always like him as a movie star as well.
Yeah.
Good footballer, good movie star, good personality, says it as it is, no problem.
Yeah, Vinny's a great guy. We play golf together. We have a lot of fun together, you know. There's a great photo of him. If you remember, the guy that was behind him, and he put his hand behind him and grabbed that guy in the coyones, you know, and that picture went on all the cover of sports magazines and all that. And him and that guy became the best of friends, and they would sign that autograph everywhere they go. They would sign that because it was on the cover of magazines. And where we play golf at, they have a big picture on the wall of Vinny, that picture where he grabbed the guy, you know.
Wow.
Oh, that's funny.
Okay, anyhow, if you have nothing else, y'all, I will answer any questions, but if you have nothing else, I can't tell you how much I enjoyed being with you.
Oh, Tom, what an honor. It's always an honor when I get to spend time with you. You're one of those kind of people. You got one of these golden auras about you, and your mission is so much bigger than comedy, and I think you know that. Even though you're a brilliant comedian and entertainer, there's something about you that's different. And it's just an honor to know you. I mean it.
I'm
very grateful.
By those remarks. I'm humbled by those remarks. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. And remember, the secret is you. You're the secret. Talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, Tom. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Talk to you again.